Hi, I'm Ed from Crystal Clear Aquatics, and I'm out here on site today servicing a pond and an Oase filtoclear filtration system. So I'm going to show you how to service, take apart and fully maintain a filtoclear system. Starting with a few of the sort of basics on the unit. It's a very good pressurised system, completely sealed. Because it's sealed, it can be stored lower than water level, so it can be partially buried in the ground like this. It means it's a very discreet filtration system. The old traditional sort of gravity box that has to be higher in the pond, they're not particularly easy units to hide, so this is a nice discreet system. Simple, straightforward inlet and outlet, and then a third connector here, which is the backwash. This is where water is flushed out for discharge. But for today, I'm going to take this unit apart completely, put a whole new set of foams in, and a new UVC tube. So this is the Oase filtoclear. This is the 30,000 model, which is the largest they do in the range. It has an integrated 55 watt UVC, and it's quite a big unit with a large stack of foam, so it filters pretty large ponds. First thing we're going to do is to make sure that the pump and the electrics are all switched off, which has been done, and we can now remove the inlet and the outlet hoses simply by unscrewing the locking collars on the sides here. Here's the first one. We'll hang on to these flat seals, make sure we don't lose those. And here's the second one. There we go. And again, we'll hang on to this seal. The next thing we can do is to remove the UVC ballast, the electrics. Now with Oase, anything blue is colour coded, it's mechanical, it's something that can be manipulated and moved, and it does something. So we've got the blue rotation valve for the backwash, we've got the blue lever for the cleaning mechanism, and we also have a little button here for the quick release on the UVC. So having pressed this blue button and twisted anti-clockwise approximately half a turn, the unit comes away and you can lift it out entirely. Being careful of the quartz sleeve there, that glass tube. There we go. And now we can completely remove the lid from the filtration system and have a look at the foams inside. So surrounding the filtration system is a plastic locking collar, a locking clip. There's a little plastic slide on the side which you open, and then a little button that you can depress. And then this whole section comes away. I like to store it in its closed position, I think it's stronger like that. And now the top can come off entirely. Let's have a look and see. So, not too bad, a little bit mucky. If you're doing a regular service, not replacing these foams, you could open this system up and you could remove the foams and give them a manual clean, a really good clean, as opposed to just the standard backwash, and then you could replace them. But today we're going to replace these foams entirely. It's something that I'd recommend doing once a year. Every spring it's worth overhauling the system, putting a brand new UV tube in and a new set of foams ready for spring, when the pond is most likely to go green and require a good filtration system. So to remove these foams, if you turn the unit upside down, there are two Phillips screws located on a little plastic plate at the bottom. We'll undo these. They've got quite a long thread, so it takes quite a while to undo them. Now, general maintenance on something like this, ideally you should be doing a backwash at least once a month, spending a few minutes performing a clean, and that really helps to look after these foams and stop them from shrinking. What can happen is, if you're not cleaning this, because it's a completely sealed unit and pressurised, a lot of muck and debris covers these foams and the pressure builds up and the sponges start to distort and compress, which really minimises the efficiency of the unit, it reduces the flow, and these foams don't have a memory, so they don't spring back. These have shrunk a little bit, but they're not too bad, but we'll get rid of these. This is pretty clean around here. Sometimes you get a lot of muck built up on this core, and that can just be rinsed off with a hose, brushed off. Now I'm replacing these with a set of genuine Oase foams. Quite expensive for what they are, if you ask me. There are cheaper alternatives on the internet which are non-Oase genuine, but I find that they tend to break up, they don't last as long, so it's much better to use the specific foams. So there's more blue than red, so we start with the blue and we build them back up. Now you might get to that point and think, that's it, I've got 2 spare. But don't be deceived, you don't want to do that. These need to be compressed and pushed down and a whole lot put back together, so that when you're doing your cleaning, when you're compressing the sponges, there's enough resistance for that to compress back out again. And if you haven't got enough sponges, that's not going to happen. So the last couple, you've got to push down. And then we'll put the filter plate back on to hold these foams in place. So it's quite a mucky job doing this, which is why I'm wearing these fetching waders and wearing gloves. Okay, so that's a new set of foams all in position. All that's left to do with this section is to give it a bit of a clean up. I find a few people struggle to reassemble these units. There's no magic to it. Perhaps a bit of a knack, but the most important thing is just to make sure that everything's clean when it goes back together. Especially anything that's in contact with a seal, the main locking mechanism. All this area wants to be clean and free of, you know, bits of grit and dust and dirt. Otherwise, it's not going to go together particularly easily. So I will clean up inside here, and also where the locking nut clamps around the top. Go. And the next job is to tackle replacing the UV tube. So to replace the UV tube within the system, you can see there's one Phillips screw here. This needs to be undone 4 or 5 turns, not removed completely. It's just there as a preventative measure to make sure this can't be undone by accident. And once you've unscrewed it a little while, you'll be able to remove this collar. This black locking collar here then unscrews anti-clockwise, and then the quartz sleeve can be removed entirely. Now, having removed the locking collar, the next thing to do is to grab hold of the quartz sleeve and to pull it out of the housing entirely. This is always a little bit difficult if it's been sat there for a whole season and hasn't been taken apart before, which it probably hasn't. A lot of muck can build up around here, and a bit of a seal can develop, and it's quite difficult to pull this sleeve out. I found that the best way to do so, if there is resistance, is to use a heat gun and just put some warm air around this little gap in here to heat up that seal. A couple of minutes of some warm air, and this is much easier to remove. They're quite fragile and quite easy to break, so that's what I tend to do anyway, is just to put some air in there to make it easier. That's what I'll do now. So having spent a couple of minutes just warming this area up with the heat gun, not too hot, this quartz sleeve has come off nice and easily, so this can be removed and put to one side safely, and then we can remove the UVC tube and replace that. The tube itself just pulls out, it's held in place with these pins. I'm using a genuine Oase UVC tube as a replacement. Again, there are cheaper alternatives, but I find that the branded Phillips tubes tend to last and work a lot better than some of the cheaper ones that are around. So once you've put the tube back into place, the metal spacer that came off originally can go back on, and the little rubber stopper on top can go back. Make sure the quartz sleeve is clean. There's no point in replacing the tube and then having a quartz sleeve covered in limescale and algae, because it really reduces the amount of light which is getting to the pond water. So that's nice and clean. Make sure the seal around here is nice and clean as well. And I'm going to use just a dab of silicone grease to act as a lubricant and keep those seals nice and supple. And finally put the locking collar back on. Once this reaches the end of the thread, it will automatically stop in the correct place. There we go. And then we can tighten up that security screw to make sure that this can't be undone by mistake. Lastly, I would just clean up any contact points where the plastic meets the body of the filter and the seals and that kind of thing, just to make it easier to put this back together. And again, I'll put a dab of silicone grease around this, just makes it a bit easier to go back in without any sort of fuss and resistance. Right, so that gets done. So all that's left to do now is to clean what's inside the filter. And the easiest way to do this really is with a vacuum. I use an Oase Pondovac. This is the Pondovac 5. It's fantastic for cleaning out muck in ponds and particularly filtration systems. So that's what I shall use now. So I'm just cleaning where the main O-ring will sit. There we go. Give the main seal a bit of a clean. And importantly, give it some grease, give it some lubricant. So get that nice and lubricated, and that will enable the top to go on with minimal fuss. I find this seal, rather than pushing it right down to the bottom, if you try to hold it towards the top of the filter unit, and then when the lid goes on, the lid sort of rolls over that seal, and it just makes it a bit easier to put that lid back on. This is where people struggle, is to reassemble this. Plastic locking collar, make sure that's clean, really on the inside particularly. You get a lot of muck and debris built up in there over a year of not being taken apart. And lastly is putting the unit back together. I've cleaned around here already, so it should go back together without any issues. Now, putting this plastic collar into place, I start at the rear section where the hinge is. And just work your way round. There we go. There's a little slide on the side here which you can slide to lock it into place. And the collar itself can rotate if it's in the correct position like that. That's fine. So we've now got to reattach the inlet and the outlet hoses, and to put the quartz sleeve and the electrics back into the unit. So when reassembling the inlet and the outlet hoses, you should find, if it's been correctly installed, that there are two different style O-rings or seals here. A green one with a flap in the middle, and then just a plain flat seal. The plain black one is for the inlet, and the green one with this flap is for the outlet. And the reason that flap is there is that this hose tail for the outlet, you can see, is clear, and it acts as a visual guide when the filtration system is working and this flap is being pushed open with the water. You can see through that clear hose tail that the system is on and running. So having reconnected the hoses, the last thing to do is to put the UVC electrics back in, making sure that the blue handle is pushed down as far as it goes. Put the ballast and the quartz sleeve back in and offer it up at an angle. It doesn't go in like this, it needs to be at an angle. You see the gap here. Just carefully push down and then rotate it and it clicks into position, and that's it, fully locked, nice and easy. We'll turn this on, check for any leaks and make sure it's all running okay. Everything's looking as it should. Check to make sure that the UV itself is working. On top of the unit there's a little indicator here, and that will shine blue to show you that the UV light is working, which it is. Make sure that the locking collar slide mechanism here is locked and can't be opened. And finally, make sure that the rotation valve here for the cleaning mechanism, the backwash, is facing the correct position. So thanks very much for watching. I hope it's been helpful. I'm Ed from Crystal Clear Aquatics.